One of the more interesting movies to come out this year was Speak No Evil, a psychological thriller starring James McAvoy and the androgynous thing from Terminator Dork Fate. I say interesting partly because the movie itself raises some important questions about human psychology and modern culture, and for the first hour and a half, it's an absolute masterclass of slowly building tension and superb character dynamics driven by a commanding performance by McAvoy. And if it wasn't for the final 20 minutes or so, it would have been an easy drinker recommends from me. Unfortunately, this is where it all kind of falls apart, and to explain why, I need to do a bit of comparison work. See, the film's an adaptation of a 2022 Danish movie called The Guests, about a mild-mannered husband and wife who go to stay with some friends that they met on vacation, only to discover the couple are definitely not what they seem. But rather than call them out for their increasingly unreasonable behaviour, they just kind of put up with it to avoid offending their hosts. And to put it mildly, it doesn't exactly end well for any of them. The remake, on the other hand, goes off in a completely different direction that not only misses the point of the original movie, sacrificing the dark and thought-provoking ending for a generic chase and fight sequence that goes on for too long, but also fails to resolve any of the film's main character arcs, and in some cases actually manages to contradict them. And yeah, I know I'm a bit late to the party on this one, but what the hell, I've been busy this year. Anyway, since both movies all have the same characters and plot beats, I'll focus on the American version until we get to the ending. So the story centers around Ben and Louise, an American couple on vacation in Italy, and pretty quickly you get a sense that all is not well with them. There's this constant low-level tension and awkwardness hanging around them, sparked by Ben's faltering career and Louise having been unfaithful in the past, and you get the sense that they're both kind of frustrated and bored with each other. Even their daughter Agnes is kind of high-strung and emotional and relies on a stuffed toy for comfort, a plot point that becomes very relevant later on, believe me. Anyway, this is when they run into Paddy and Kira, a British couple that are staying at the same hotel with their son Ants. And on the surface, Paddy and Kira seem to be everything that they're not. Relaxed, boisterous, free-spirited and confident. And I love that the very first interaction between them is Paddy subtly testing Ben by asking to take one of the sun loungers from them. It seems like an innocent request since nobody's sitting on it at the time, but the fact that Agnes's toy is resting on it suggests that she probably would use it once she was finished in the pool. But Ben doesn't want to be rude or confrontational, so he hands it over without question, even though you can see that Louise doesn't quite approve. A little tiny concession, a little sign that Ben's not a man of strong character, that he's exactly the kind of guy Paddy's looking for. When they meet again later in the day, Paddy pushes just a little further by offering to take Agnes for a ride on his mopeds. This time Ben hesitates. He's clearly not comfortable trusting his daughter to a stranger, but again he gives in and lets Paddy take her for a spin. And it's interesting because if he'd put his foot down and refused just one time, Paddy probably would have left him alone and went looking for another victim. But he didn't, because he didn't want to make a fuss. Anyway, Paddy soon proves to be charming and charismatic. The two couples quickly strike up a friendship and end up exchanging addresses. And when a letter arrives a few weeks later inviting Ben and Louise to come stay with them in their cottage, they pretty much jump at the chance. And this is where the plot really gets going, as Ben, Louise and Agnes settle into the remote farmhouse with their new hosts. At first it's all smiles and fun, but as time passes, Paddy's behaviour starts to get increasingly erratic and confrontational, constantly pushing the limits of acceptable behaviour. It gradually becomes clear to Ben and Louise that their new friends are not the people they thought they were. Louise wants to leave, but Ben doesn't want to offend their hosts, and even when she puts her foot down and forces them to get away in the middle of the night, they're soon forced to go back because Agnes left their stuffed rabbit behind. That fucking rabbit, man. You know, for someone who apparently can't live without the thing, you'd think she'd take better care of it, but whatever. Anyway, matters finally come to a head when Agnes discovers proof that Paddy and Kira have done this shit multiple times before, luring gullible families to their house and eventually killing them. When Ben and Louise discover the truth as well, they try to escape, only to get captured by Paddy and Kira. Now, this is where the two movies really start to diverge, so pay attention 007, because this is important. In the original Danish version, the couple, in this case called Bjorn and Louise, escape the house, but when their car breaks down, they soon get recaptured by Patrick and Karen. And instead of fighting back or trying to do anything, Bjorn and Louise do what they've done throughout the whole movie, act passive and try to calm the situation down. Even when Patrick cuts out Agnes's tongue and carries her off into the night, the couple still don't resist. And when they're forced into a ditch to be executed, Bjorn's final line to Patrick underscores the entire point of the movie. Why are you doing this? Because you let me. This is the core message of the film. Bjorn and Louise weren't prisoners. They could have left at any time they wanted, but even when they were clearly uncomfortable, even when their hosts were becoming weird and aggressive and they knew that something was wrong, they chose to stay rather than cause a fuss. This is a situation entirely of their own making because they refused to stand up for themselves. They were weak and cowardly, and because of that, they lost everything. It's a powerful critique of the permissive culture we live in today, where we're conditioned to accept and tolerate even the most absurd and ridiculous behaviour, where offending strangers is somehow seen as worse than putting our own loved ones in danger, where people are told not to fight back or stand up for themselves, to be compassionate, to be reasonable, to be passive, which is great until you run into people who are none of those things. And in a more specific sense, it's an examination of what happens when traditionally masculine traits like assertiveness, protectiveness, and even aggression are systematically bred out of men, to the point where they're no longer even capable of being protectors and providers. They're just useless, spineless victims, easily coerced and intimidated into doing things they know are wrong. Bjorn is theoretically the patriarch of the family, the one who's supposed to protect them from danger at any cost, but when he comes up against a physically and emotionally dominant force like Patrick, he's completely unable to stand up to him because it goes against everything he's been taught, and in the end, it costs him everything. It's a grim but very thought-provoking ending to a movie that has a lot to say for itself. Now let's look at the remake, shall we?
Fuck.
In this version, Ben, Louise and Agnes are taken out into the barn to be executed, only this time Louise switches into full-on girl boss mode, slashes Paddy in the face with a box cutter, magically disarms Kira, who totally had the drop on her with a shotgun, and then leads the family outside to escape. But when their escape route is blocked, they barricade themselves in the farmhouse, and I kid you not, Ben hides in a cupboard while Louise girl bosses her way through the entire encounter. She injures Paddy multiple times, somehow manages to stop him breaking into a room even though he's easily twice her size and weight, rescues Ben when he tries and fails to take down Paddy's friend with a hammer, and even kills Kira when she's about to shoot the family up on the roof. Then Agnes channels her own inner girl boss by injecting Paddy with a sedative that drops him like a stone, and even though Ben now has him at gunpoint, he still doesn't do anything because he's a useless pussy, which leaves it up to Ant to finish the job. Then they all drive away and that's it, that's the film over.
Oh, come on!
What a disappointing end to a fucking awesome movie, but it's an end that perfectly sums up the difference in philosophy between American and European filmmakers. The original version was dark, bleak and thought-provoking, bringing together the film's central premise into a grimly impactful finale. The remake, on the other hand, combines a tediously conventional and often implausible action-packed finale with an ending that felt like it was lifted from a completely different movie, an ending that doesn't really have anything to say for itself. And it seems to have been based off the idea that American audiences just couldn't wrap their heads around an ending where the good guys fail and the bad guys get away with everything. Well, clearly they've never watched Nightcrawler. But okay, fine, if you really need to change the ending so that the main characters fight back and survive, then surely the logical starting point would be Ben. After all, the whole premise of the movie is that Ben's lack of assertiveness is the source of all of the family's problems. His failure to get a job and provide for the family, his failure to meet his wife's needs leading to her affair, his failure to be a strong father figure to his daughter leading to her dependence on the stuffed toy, and most importantly, his failure to stand up to Paddy when he knows the man's out of line. In other words, Ben is a weak man, and that weakness is affecting everything and everyone around him. A logical character arc would have seen him realise that weakness and passivity isn't going to work on a guy like Paddy, and the only way to survive is to finally grow a spine, act like a fucking man, and do whatever it takes to protect his family. It would also feed into the overall message that his weakness in all aspects of his life is what really caused this to happen, and that maybe now he's finally ready to be the man he's supposed to be. movie. Again, I think it would make for a weaker and less provocative ending than the original, but at least it would make sense from a narrative and character point of view. The actual ending sees Louise do 90% of the work, take most of the risks and do almost all of the fighting. In effect, she's the one who acts like a man and does everything she can to protect the family, while Ben cowers in a cupboard and doesn't know what to do. Which I'm sure conforms to the modern Hollywood mindset that women are the new men, and actual men just need to shut up, step aside and let them take over. But in narrative and thematic terms, it accomplishes nothing, because really, what have any of these characters actually learned from this experience? Louise has learned that she can't rely on Ben to protect her and Agnes, so their marriage is probably going to collapse like it was going to do anyway. Ben's learned that he doesn't have what it takes to stand up for himself, so his life is just going to continue down the same meandering path of failure and disappointment as before. And Agnes has learned that she really needs to take better care of that fucking rabbit. Either way, it's a muddled and unsatisfying ending that undermines instead of underscoring the central theme of the movie, and turns what should have been a gripping, dark and impactful plot into a disappointingly conventional slasher flick. But hey, there's always the original version if you want to see how it should have ended. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.